Chapter 31 The Abandoned Young Master of the Marquisate 12. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The oldest prince had no clue what his sixth brother really thought of him. If he did, he'd be all over him, saying, "Put up or shut up," that the guy always wanted others to do the heavy lifting while he swooped in to grab the credit. Like that ever happens, anyway, the eldest prince was too busy scheming to notice the sixth prince's disdain. He spent every waking moment plotting how to snag the throne with his advisors. Things were heating up in the capital. Different factions in the court were secretly battling it out, setting traps for each other. One wrong step and you were toast. When the big boys scrap, the little guys get hurt. A lot of low-level officials were shaking in their boots at court, terrified of getting caught in the crossfire. The emperor saw the power plays and mostly looked the other way. He hated to admit it, but he was getting old. If he wanted the dynasty to keep going, he had to pick the right successor, and after all this time, he had a pretty good idea who it should be. Out of all his sons, the eldest, sixth, and eighth princes were the standouts, the top contenders, but even though the eldest was firstborn, he was a real piece of work, cruel, petty, and stubborn. He'd be a terrible ruler. The sixth prince was sharp and clever, sure, but he was too reliant on sneaky tactics. He just didn't have the kind of noble character you want in a king. Only the eighth prince was truly open-minded, brave, smart, and strategic. He had all the makings of a great leader. That day, the emperor sat in his study for hours, finally reaching a decision. "Xiao Mingzi, get the eighth prince here. I want to see him now." "Yes, your majesty," Xiao Mingzi replied, bowing and backing out of the room, the eighth prince being summoned to the palace. At this crucial moment, everyone in the capital was on edge, their hearts pounding. Soon after, several old ministers known for their loyalty were also called to the palace. Seeing this, everyone pretty much figured out what was going on. The eldest and sixth princes got the news and felt a cold dread. They were antsy and couldn't settle down. That night, the eighth prince and the old ministers left the palace, but no one leaked any details. The silence only made everyone more nervous. The emperor wouldn't have called them all in at the same time for nothing. This quiet was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, at morning court the next day, the emperor dropped a bomb. He was naming the eighth prince as the crown prince. The ministers were stunned at first, but then it clicked. They quickly snapped out of it and started offering their congratulations. The other princes had already resigned themselves to the fact that they weren't going to get the crown. They were bummed, of course, but they kept their faces friendly and respectful, showing nothing. Only the eldest and sixth princes looked like they'd seen a ghost. The eldest prince stared at the eighth prince, surrounded by well-wishers, his face a mask of despair. All he could think was, "I'm screwed." He'd always gone out of his way to undermine the eighth prince. Now that he was about to take power, his life was going to be miserable. The sixth prince felt the same way. He was freaking out. He hadn't been as openly hostile as his older brother, but they'd still butted heads. Things weren't going to end well for him either. If the shoe were on the other foot, he wouldn't show any mercy to his older brother or the eighth prince. Now he was the loser. The officials who had backed the eldest and sixth princes were also in a panic, close to tears. They were done for. Picking the wrong side had serious consequences. The crown prince was definitely going to settle the score when he took the throne. Not only were they finished, but their families were too. The eighth prince, now the crown prince, Xuanhuan, knelt to accept the imperial decree. As he stepped aside, watching the reactions of the other officials, he had mixed feelings. You couldn't just sit on the sidelines when there was a fight for the ultimate prize. Xuanhuan had been groomed for this since he was a kid. He'd fought his way through every obstacle. Luckily, he'd won. His father was getting weaker every day. Being named crown prince was the last hurdle. Barring any surprises, he was the next in line for the throne. The dust had settled in the capital. Some people were relieved, others were terrified. The news that Xuanhuan had been named crown prince didn't reach the Huguogong mansion until over 10 days later. Fengqing was a long way from the capital, and the news came in a letter sent by Xuanhuan himself. Everyone at the Huguogong mansion was thrilled, and so was Shurqin. This meant the capital would leave them alone for a while, and his mission wouldn't have any extra complications. After being in Fengqing for so long, Shurqin had seen how much friction there was between Xuanhuan and Daxia. Peaceful coexistence was a pipe dream, people from the same country fought over money and power. How could two different countries get along? Daxia had tons of resources, while Xuanhuan was poor. How could they resist the temptation of invading Daxia? They couldn't. Thinking about the Xuanhuan soldiers who kept testing their defenses, Shi Qing had a realization: he'd been blinded by the original owner's wishful thinking. Where there was money to be made, there were fights. Even siblings would argue and become enemies, so how could you expect two countries to be different? The occasional skirmish between Daxia and Xuanhuan was unavoidable. So why not just let Daxia take over Xuanhuan? Daxia and Xuanhuan weren't like humans and demons. They couldn't live side by side, and the fighting would never stop. They were the same race. Daxia could take the initiative, merge the two countries, get rid of Xuanhuan for good, and eliminate the threat. Right? He decided to find a way to conquer Xuanhuan and solve the problem once and for all. Shi Qing went to Xuanhuan to gather intel. The current ruler was newly crowned and super ambitious. In the original story, the eldest prince and his cronies had tried to team up with him to take down the Huguogong mansion, but the guy was secretly planning to invade Daxia all along and ended up letting the fox into the henhouse. But now, with the Protectorate mansion and Zhao's army in charge, the attempts to test Fengqing had been costly. If he wanted to attack and merge Xuanhuan, Shi Qing realized he needed to go to Beijing and talk to Xia Wenqing. Chapter 32: The Abandoned Young Master of the Marquisate 13. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, you're heading to Beijing, military advisor? Zhao Weiguo asked, a little surprised. I thought you weren't keen on staying there before. What's changed so soon after coming back? Shi Qing confirmed, that's right. May I ask why you're going this time? Zhao Weiguo pressed, his curiosity piqued. Shi Qing was still an enigma after all this time. Zhao Weiguo could only chalk it up to the mysteries of his hidden background. When in doubt, better to just ask. Hearing the question, Shi Qing decided to gauge Zhao Weiguo's reaction to the idea of merging Xuanhuan. Instead of answering directly, he countered, Xuanhuan has always had its eyes on Great Xia. Has the protector of the country considered putting an end to this situation? Zhao Weiguo was taken aback. End this situation? Ever since his grandfather established the protector of the country mansion, the men of the Zhao family had been raised with the responsibility of defending the country in the northwest ingrained in them. He remembered his father telling him as a child, when you grow up, Weiguo, you'll take over my position, defend our country, protect Fengqing, and safeguard the northwest. Young and innocent then, he had puffed out his chest and replied, yes, father. Now, in middle age, he had passed that responsibility onto his son, generation after generation. As long as the Huguo mansion existed, it had to maintain peace in the northwest and protect its people. Now, Shi Qing was asking if he had considered ending it all. This wasn't something you could achieve simply by winning a few battles. To truly end the current situation, you had to address the root cause, and that was no easy feat. Thinking this over, he looked directly at Shi Qing and asked, I have considered it, but do you have any ideas? Instead of letting Xuanhuan keep provoking us, we should take the offensive, break into Xuanhuan, and merge it into Daxia. Shi Qing said, his gaze equally serious. I know all this, but Chu State's terrain is so complicated. We often get lost and fall into their traps. Shi Qing had anticipated this concern. He replied calmly, I have a solution for the challenges you're facing. All we need now is the capital's approval. Hearing this, Zhao Weiguo wasn't worried that the emperor wouldn't agree. Chu State had always been a thorn in the side of every Daxia ruler. If someone had a way to eliminate it, they wouldn't refuse, he said excitedly. Great. If you can solve these problems, I'll personally lead the troops into Chu State. Excellent. I'll head to the capital in a few days. Wait for my good news. Shi Qing was set to leave for the capital immediately, but Zhao Weiguo, fearing for his safety, asked his son, Prince Xuanhuan, to accompany him. Despite Shi Qing's mysterious abilities since arriving in Fengqing, one thing he hadn't displayed was brute strength. This led Zhao Weiguo to believe that Shi Qing, while incredibly intelligent, likely lacked physical prowess. He had no idea that raw power was actually Shurqing's greatest strength. Shurqing didn't object to the arrangement. Having Xuanhuan along was fine, he probably had his own agenda. A few days later, Shurqing and Xuanhuan set off with a few guards. Xuanhuan did indeed have something important to do in the capital, which was also a major reason for their trip. Upon arrival, Shurqing went straight to see Xia Wenqing with Xuanhuan. After hearing Shurqing's plan, Xia Wenqing was visibly excited, his eyes burning with anticipation. "Master Shi, are you certain about what you're saying?" "I'm 90% confident," Shurqing replied calmly. Those problems were nothing to him. "Okay, I'll report this matter to my father truthfully." "Thank you, Your Highness." Xia Wenqing wasted no time and informed the emperor after morning court the next day. In the imperial study, the emperor was intrigued. "Oh. Did he really say that?" "Yes, father. He told me personally. The man is incredibly talented and doesn't speak idly. I've benefited from his guidance myself." "So, you have great faith in him?" "I do. Why not let him try? If, as he says, he has a way to deal with Chu state's terrain and conquer them, then the people on Dacia's border won't have to suffer their invasions anymore. Even if it doesn't work, we can withdraw the troops in time. The loss won't be significant. Besides, the protector of the country won't let him run wild. Why not give him a chance? If you put it that way, it would be unreasonable for me to disagree." "All right, have him come see me tomorrow. I want to see what kind of person you and the protector of the country value so highly." "Yes, father." Upon returning, Xia Wenqing sent word to Shurqing about the upcoming meeting with the emperor, which was well within Shurqing's expectations. The next day, Shurqing met the emperor. Though aged, the emperor was still a commanding presence. Upon entering, Shurqing didn't kneel but offered a slight fist salute. Seeing this perceived rudeness, the emperor didn't immediately react negatively. Instead, observing the young man's composure, he nodded inwardly. Though young and appearing a few years younger than his eighth son, his demeanor was no less impressive than his own son's. "Your Majesty. Is it true that you and the prince can invade Tsugu?" The emperor cut to the chase. "Absolutely true." Shurqing spent the afternoon discussing everything with the emperor, from methods for attacking Tsugu to military strategies, people's livelihood, and his ideals. Had darkness not fallen and the palace rules permitted it, the emperor likely wouldn't have let him leave. That night, the emperor couldn't stop thinking about what Shurqing had said. The man was a true genius. He seemed to know and be capable of everything. No wonder the protector of the country and his eighth son believed him so readily. After talking to him all afternoon, the emperor felt that the man had a rare gift for persuasion. Dacia had been invaded by Tsugu for so many years. It wasn't that they hadn't considered conquering Tsugu, but every attempt had ended in failure and heavy losses. Dacia could only passively defend. Now, such a person had appeared. This problem that had plagued Dacia for centuries might finally be solved. How could he not be excited? He even secretly lamented, why wasn't such talent his own son? Shurqing was unaware of the emperor's thoughts. Upon returning, he discussed a series of plans with the prince. The emperor had promised to issue an imperial edict to attack Chu state in a few days. Shurqing planned to return to the northwest after the edict was issued. Sure enough, a few days later, the emperor issued an edict to attack Chu state, citing their constant harassment of Dacia's borders as justification. The prince of the protectorate went to receive the edict. Dacia was a nation of etiquette and rarely initiated war. This was the first time the emperor had proactively issued an edict to attack another country. When the edict was released, many pedantic ministers came forward to advise against it, but they were all overruled by the prince. Seeing that the emperor had made up his mind, they fell silent. Shurqing and Xuanhuan returned to Fengqing in the northwest with the imperial edict. Chapter 33 The Abandoned Young Master of the Marquisate 14. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Shurqing returned to Fengqing, he held several meetings with the Duke of the Protectorate and his son, along with several generals, to finalize the battle plan. Knowing that Chu State's terrain was complex, Shurqin provided a detailed map. He also knew about the miasma in certain areas, so he secured a supply of medicinal herbs and had the army doctors prepare hundreds of thousands of detox pills. With all potential problems solved, the Daxia soldiers, a powerful force, marched straight into Chu State. Zhao Weiguo had always known Shurqin was resourceful, but this battle truly revealed the extent of his abilities. He had anticipated a difficult, obstacle-filled campaign, but it turned out to be surprisingly smooth, thanks to the detailed map. Chu State's terrain was no longer a hindrance. Shurqin even used it to his advantage, winning several key battles with fewer troops. The detox pills neutralized the miasma, allowing the soldiers to chase down the Chu State army, routing them completely. It was a stunning victory. Zhao Weiguo was even more surprised to discover that Shurqin, a brilliant military strategist, was also a formidable martial artist, even more skilled than their own fighters. During one battle, a Chu State general charged directly at Shurqin, who was briefly isolated from the main fighting. Zhao Weiguo, fearing for Shurqin's safety, watched anxiously, but, unexpectedly, Shurqin grabbed the general's spear, drew the self-defense sword Zhao Yunfei had given him, and launched a counterattack. The unexpected move stunned everyone. Their morale soared, and they crushed the Chu State forces. The attack on Chu State went incredibly well. By the time the victory report reached the emperor, they had already captured 5 cities. The news astonished the court officials. They all praised the emperor's wisdom and divine favor. The emperor, also surprised and delighted, thought he had made the right bet. He had sensed Shurqin's potential from their initial interactions. He hadn't expected such a pleasant surprise. Chu State had always been a threat to Daxia, a long-standing problem for emperors. To conquer and annex it during his reign would be a monumental achievement, a legacy he could be proud of. The Northwest Army advanced like an unstoppable sword, as the victory reports described. The Chu State soldiers either surrendered or died, and cities fell one after another. Chu State sent envoys to negotiate peace, but their offer was rejected. The Northwest Army marched directly into the Chu State palace. Within 2 years, Chu State was destroyed and incorporated into Daxia. The Northwest Army celebrated, knowing they would receive a few months of leave to visit their families. Shurqin was pleased as well. His mission was complete with the fall of Chu State. Brother Shur. My father says we're all going to the capital to report. You made the biggest contribution this time. You're sure to get a high position. Zhao Yunfei had matured during the war, but he remained the same with Shurqin and his family. Shurqin's reputation in the army rivaled that of the duke. Everyone called him a military advisor, except Zhao Yunfei, who still called him Brother Shur. Shurqin smiled at Zhao Yunfei. You'll probably be made a general yourself. Zhao Yunfei grinned. That's right. I did my part, too. His dream of becoming a general was finally coming true. The group traveled to the capital and arrived a few months later. The streets were lined with people welcoming them. Shurqin and the generals rode to the palace. Inside the palace hall, they knelt and saluted the emperor. Shurqin, wanting to avoid attention, kept a low profile. The generals were promoted based on their merits, and Zhao Yunfei became a general, as expected. Shurqin's absence from the awards puzzled everyone. After the ceremony, Shurqin followed the eunuch to the imperial study. The crown prince, Xia Wenqing, sat reviewing documents while the emperor drank tea. Xia Wenqing put down his work when he saw Shurqin enter. Your Majesty, Your Highness, Shurqin said, offering a simple greeting. 2 years, and you haven't changed, the emperor observed. Neither has the emperor. The emperor looked at Shurqin and asked, You still don't want to join the court? Shurqin had traded his achievements for the freedom to live as he pleased. He was talented and resourceful, capable and brave. He could have been a high-ranking official, but he wasn't interested. Shurqin replied, I said before that I came for experience, and I'll return once I've gained it. He had no desire to spend his life working in the court. With his mission accomplished, he longed for freedom. Fine, have it your way. Thank you, Your Majesty. After Shurqin left, Xia Wenqing went with him. Mr. Shur, would you care to visit my residence for a chat? I'd be honored, Your Highness. Shirqing went to the crown prince's residence, where they spoke for a long time before Shirqing departed. Xia Wenqing watched him leave, feeling a sense of loss. He had tried to persuade Shirqing to stay before, and now he was refusing again. It was rare for someone to reject him repeatedly. He recognized that Shirqing deserved a life of freedom, confidence, and style. Shirqing returned to the duke's residence. Zhao Yunfei asked hesitantly, "Brother Shi, have you finished your training?" "Yes." "Are you really leaving? Won't you stay?" "I'm going back to report after my training." "Will you ever come back?" "Maybe, maybe not." "What if I miss you?" Zhao Yunfei considered Shirqing part of his family. Shirqing had told them he wouldn't serve as an official in Beijing, otherwise, Zhao Yunfei would have spoken up when Shirqing was ignored during the award ceremony. Chapter 34 The Abandoned Young Master of the Marquisate 15. You are listening at novelfull.audio. All good things must come to an end, Shirqing said with a sigh, noticing Zhao Yunfei's downcast expression. Seeing Shirqing's usual gentle demeanor and the extra patience he always showed him, Zhao Yunfei blurted out, "But if you wanted to, we could have stayed together." "I'm not leaving right now," Shirqing chuckled, amused by Zhao Yunfei's childlike behavior. He'd known the kid for years, taught him so much, and now it seemed he saw him as an older brother. "Then leave later. I can't bear to see you go, and neither can my parents or my brother." "All right," Shirqing agreed. He wasn't some hidden family disciple rushing back to duty. There was no pressure, so Shirqing ended up staying in the capital for quite a while. Many in the capital knew of Shirqing and his special status. Rumor had it he was instrumental in conquering Chu state, present at almost every victory, though no one knew why the emperor hadn't granted him an official position. The attitudes of the prince and the duke protector suggested there was more than met the eye. Most people adopted a friendly if possible approach towards Shirqing. During this time, Zhao Yunfei dragged Shirqing to several parties. At one flower-viewing banquet, they encountered the two young masters of the Guangping Marquis mansion, the eldest son, Lin Huijin, and the adopted son, Lin Yuxuan. Shirqing and Zhao Yunfei sat in the pavilion, watching the men stroll along the path. Shirqing glanced at them briefly before looking away. The sixth prince's failed power grab had left the Guangping Marquis mansion, once his strongest supporter, in a state of decline, a far cry from its former glory. The two young masters were no longer as arrogant and flamboyant as they once were, instead acting humble and low-key. In the original story, the Marquis mansion had severed ties with the original owner. Since Shirqing's arrival, there had been no contact. Given the original owner's wish to stay away, Shirqing didn't concern himself with the mansion's future. Seeing Lin Yuxuan, Shirqing suddenly remembered the drama he'd binged with the system not long ago. Because Lin Yuxuan was already engaged, he and Li Xiangxiang were forced to meet in secret. However, a young lady, friends with the daughter of the revenue minister, spotted their clandestine rendezvous and immediately snitched to the revenue minister's daughter, Wen Xie, who was Lin Yuxuan's fiancée. Wen Xie flew into a rage. Already arrogant and domineering, she couldn't stand the thought of her fiancé hooking up with another woman before their wedding. She immediately gathered a group of friends and ambushed Li Xiangxiang and Lin Yuxuan. The group of girls physically restrained the pair while Wen Xie ordered her servants to beat Li Xiangxiang until she was bruised and swollen. Finally, Wen Xie coldly warned her to stay away from her fiancé and to have some shame. This incident caused a rift between Li Xiangxiang and Lin Yuxuan. Heartbroken by the lack of comfort from Lin Yuxuan, Li Xiangxiang finally realized the disparity in their social standing and returned to Jiqing alone. Lin Yuxuan still harbored feelings for Li Xiangxiang. After all, she was the woman he truly loved, and she adored him, but Wen Xie had ratted them out to the Marquis and his wife, who now kept a close eye on him. He never had the chance to see Li Xiangxiang again, a regret that haunted them both. Shirqing and the system had lamented together that these two, who had overcome so much in the original story, were now separated by circumstance. The system had sighed at this. Compared to the confident and cheerful Lin Yuxuan who never left Li Xiangxiang's side in the original story, the reason for the current disconnect was simply that Lin Yuxuan was not powerful enough and lacked confidence. The sixth prince's failure had robbed Lin Yuxuan of any influence. He was completely dependent on the Guangping Marquis mansion and had to follow their every whim. powerful families always prioritize their interests. In the original story, the Marquis hadn't interfered, but his wife had always been an obstacle. That was because Lin Yuxuan brought value to the family, whereas Lin's affections for a powerless girl had no impact. The original owner had never understood why his birth parents favored their adopted son, but Shurqing understood clearly after watching the original plot unfold. Why would the whole family abandon their own child for their adopted child? Because of feelings and self-interest. Compared to Lin Yuxuan, who had been raised in the Guangping Marquis mansion, the original owner, freshly brought back from the countryside, was an outsider. Lin Yuxuan, who could speak well in front of the new emperor, was more beneficial to the whole mansion, and the original owner didn't know anything. No matter how you compared them, the original owner was completely outmatched. So, when Lin Yuxuan tried to make things difficult for him, the Marquis and his wife had turned a blind eye. The original owner was destined to lose. In this era where blood relations were valued, the whole family could make such a choice because Lin Yuxuan was only the youngest son and would not inherit everything from the Lin family. The son of the whole mansion will inherit the estate of Lin family. A younger son who can't do anything and will even embarrass the whole mansion is compared with an adopted son who can help the whole mansion and make the whole mansion go to a higher level. It's insignificant. If you give it up, give it up. Fortunately, the original owner was open-minded and ultimately chose to leave. His wish was to have nothing to do with the whole mansion. Shurqing and Zhao Yunfei left at the end of the banquet. Over the next few days, Zhao Yunfei took Shurqing out to play again, introducing him to many young men and women. Shurqing knew what he was up to, trying to make him miss the capital, hoping he'd stay. If not, that he would remember these things in the future and come back to see him. Shurqing pretended not to notice his little schemes. After staying in the capital for over half a year, Shurqing still chose to leave. He'd come to experience life, to broaden his horizons, which was conducive to cultivation. In the past, he had practiced in seclusion every day. Although he hasn't encountered a bottleneck so far, there would definitely be problems after a long time. It was his senior brother who had identified the issue and tasked him with the fast transmigration mission. Now, after completing 2 tasks, he found the mission worlds fascinating. Each world operated according to its own rules and had its own unique differences. After Shurqing left the capital, he traveled the world with his horse and his system. Just as before, he occasionally contacted Zhao Yunfei, sending them interesting things he found. Because there was no longer a threat in the northwest, the Protectorate mansion had now settled in the capital. The emperor passed away a year after Shurqing left, and the crown prince ascended the throne. The new emperor greatly valued the Duke Protector's mansion, and the tragic fate of discarding the bough after the birds are gone never happened. The eldest prince and the 6th prince were also sent to their respective fiefdoms by the new emperor. Those ministers who had supported them were dismissed and their positions gradually filled by others. The Guangping Marquis mansion was among those who fell from grace and gradually declined. Chapter 35 The Villain in the Apocalypse 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After his life ended naturally, Shurqing returned to his world. He didn't look for his master this time, choosing instead to practice for a few months before heading straight into his next mission. When Shurqing came to, his head was swimming. Outside, a racket of noise assaulted his ears, messy footsteps, pounding on the door, and the occasional scream. Total chaos. He was definitely tied up. Calmly, Shurqing looked around. He was in a small room packed with people, a dozen or so men and women all wearing the same school uniform. They were huddled away from him, sitting silently in the corners. While he had a moment of peace, Shurqing absorbed the world's plot and the original owner's memories. Now he knew what was up. He tested his bonds. His hands and feet were tied tight with rope, already numb. A kid with glasses beside him had been watching him. Seeing him wake, he hurried over, surprised. Mu Bai, you're awake. How do you feel? Still feel bad? Better. Good, good. I knew you wouldn't turn into a zombie. The boy said, starting to untie him. The kid was making a bit of a fuss. Seeing Shurqing awake and acting normal, the others breathed a collective sigh of relief and moved closer. Shenmu Bai, how are you holding up? I'm so sorry. This is all my fault you're in this mess. I really am. A girl approached, her voice full of guilt. It's okay. Thanks for saving me back there. If you ever need anything, just name it. The girl shoved a bag of bread into Xuanhuan's pocket. She was clearly feeling guilty, but also seriously grateful, a person who knew how to pay back a debt. Okay. The original owner was tied up because a zombie had scratched him when he saved the girl during their last escape attempt. Anyone scratched by a zombie was likely to turn. They were all scared he'd get infected and change, so they tied him up. During all this, the original owner had also accidentally unlocked superpowers. Xuanhuan opened his palm, and a small ice sword floated above it. Just like the original owner, he'd also awakened the ice power. Xuanhuan didn't try to hide it. Several people saw the display, and their eyes lit up. Mu Bai, you got superpowers. Yep. Whoa, Shen Mu Bai, you're awesome, that the group praised Xuanhuan in hushed tones. Superpowers meant more safety. They were all in this together, so his good fortune was theirs, too. After the excitement died down, a tall boy walked over and whispered to Xuanhuan, "What do we do now? There are zombies everywhere out there. Mu Bai, got any ideas? We're running low on food. If we don't find some supplies, we're gonna starve." The original owner was a big shot at school before the world went to hell, and he'd naturally become the leader of this group after the outbreak. It made sense the boy would ask him. "It's late. Don't worry, we'll go out to look for supplies tomorrow." Thought it was already afternoon, only a few hours until dark. From the original owner's memories, Xuanhuan knew this group wasn't strong enough to handle zombies, and they couldn't see at night. It'd be safer to head out during daylight. Okay, whatever you say. The boys gathered everyone, agreed on where to search for supplies in the morning, then broke up and returned to their spots. Xuanhuan closed his eyes to rest, reviewing the world's plot again. It was another small world spun off from a novel, telling the story of a reborn man who became a big shot. Before his rebirth, the male lead, Sun Songyang, was away at school when the apocalypse hit. He lost contact with his parents and had to survive with his girlfriend, Zhang Xiyu. Neither of them had superpowers. They eventually made it to a survivor base with a bunch of other people under military escort, but they lived in the slums, earning just enough to eat through hard labor, barely scraping by. One day, a superpowered guy cruising through the slums took a liking to Zhang Xiyu's looks. He started hitting on her, sending her food and supplies. Zhang Xiyu and Sun Songyang had been tight for years. At first, she turned the guy down, but eventually, the temptation of food got to her, and she dumped Sun Songyang. Sun Songyang was devastated. He felt she betrayed their years together, even though she occasionally slipped him some food, which definitely helped him out. The base was full of all sorts of people. Unfortunately, Sun Songyang got caught in the crossfire of a fight between superpowered people, got hit with stray power, and died. Before he died, Sun Songyang figured that was it for him. But then he woke up and realized he was reborn, back before the apocalypse even started. On top of that, he accidentally activated a jade pendant he always wore. Turns out, the pendant had a huge pocket dimension inside. Not only that, but it also had a spiritual spring and a method for cultivating immortality. Sun Songyang was ecstatic. This was the classic setup for a major comeback. He vowed that after this rebirth, he'd become a top dog, never let anyone walk all over him again, never have his life be worth less than dirt. Having been through the ringer in the apocalypse, Sun Songyang knew how valuable supplies would be. He started buying everything he could. His family was well off, and he had a decent amount of money in his account. He went on a shopping spree, stocking up on clothes, food, fuel, medicine, weapons. Everything went into his space. During this time, Sun Songyang dumped Zhang Xiyu, the girl who betrayed him in his previous life, and made sure to humiliate her properly. Before the apocalypse, Sun Songyang used the spiritual spring in his space to cleanse his meridians and reached the second level of Qi training. This time, he went home. He'd lost contact with his parents in his last life, never knowing if they were alive or dead. This time, he gave each of them a glass of water from the spring to prevent them from turning into zombies later on. When the apocalypse hit, Sun Songyang went on a supermarket sweep, then grabbed his parents. Using his knowledge of future events, he recruited future powerhouses as his henchmen, building his own superpowered team. Every member was top-notch. They killed zombies, gathered supplies, and eventually built a base together, with Sun Songyang as the leader. Along the way, Sun Songyang met tons of amazing women, all of whom fell for him instantly and inevitably ended up in his harem. Eventually, Sun Songyang became the ruler of his world with beautiful women hanging all over him. Chapter 36 The Villain in the Apocalypse 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xuanhuan, the original owner, was a trust fund kid with a good family background before the apocalypse. When the world ended, he was in high school. The group from earlier were his classmates. Not long after the apocalypse began, while they were in class, students started dropping like flies, twitching on the floor. When they got up, they turned into zombies like you see on TV. They bit anyone they saw, and anyone they bit turned into a zombie, and so on. Xuanhuan was a rational and level-headed guy. When it all went down, while other students were running in every direction, he and a few others hid in an empty classroom and rescued more classmates later. They barricaded the classroom door with desks and chairs, making it safe, but they had no food. After hiding for 2 days, everyone was starving and they had to find a way out of the school. They started with over 20 people, but after escaping the school and running for their lives, only a dozen or so were left. After escaping the school, they found that the once thriving city had become a ghost town in just a few days. Zombies roamed the streets. After they got out, nobody dared go it alone. They found a small warehouse and holed up together. That's when Xuanhuan arrived, right after they escaped the school. At a crucial moment, Xuanhuan pulled a female classmate out of the way, got grabbed by zombies, and accidentally unlocked his superpowers. In the original plot, Xuanhuan was supposed to wake up his powers today too. Later, they all went to find supplies. Worried about their families, people left in small groups to check on their parents, and the temporary alliance dissolved. After a lot of difficulty, he finally made it back home. After the initial outbreak, he'd called his parents while the internet was still up and told them to wait for him at home. Luckily, his parents hadn't turned into zombies and were still at home. Xuanhuan and his parents stayed at home for 2 weeks. During that time, Xuanhuan and his father went out to scavenge for food. Xuanhuan tested out his superpowers on the zombies. The more he used them, the stronger they got. Then a helicopter flew over the city, announcing that the government had established a safe base in the capital. People could wait for rescuers or try to make their own way there. After talking it over, Xuanhuan's family decided to head to the capital. In this lawless end-of-the-world scenario, only the government could give people any sense of security, so, the 3 of them drove all the way to the capital. On the road, they ran into lots of other people trying to do the same thing, and countless zombies. Luckily, Xuanhuan had superpowers, and they were getting stronger all the time. When he ran into regular zombies, his ice arrows could pierce their brains and kill them instantly. They were lucky and managed to avoid major trouble. But just as they were about to reach Hope Base in the capital, they ran into a group of people who seemed special. The group was led by a guy who had superpowers. Xuanhuan could sense that pretty much all of them had powers and were seriously strong. Xuanhuan's family, like everyone else, tried to stay out of their way and keep a low profile, but one of the girls called out to Xuanhuan, that he turned around and saw a sweet-looking woman walking towards him. Her face looked familiar. He vaguely remembered her from school, though they weren't close. Xuanhuan just grunted in response. These people didn't seem like they'd be easy to deal with. He didn't want anything to do with them. The woman ran up to him, looking at him strangely, and invited him to join their group. Xuanhuan noticed that the others were looking at the man in charge. The man nodded, and then they started trying to persuade him too, like it was some great honor to join them. Xuanhuan wasn't impressed. He glanced respectfully at the leader. The man looked arrogant. He didn't want to join them. The group tried to persuade him a few times, but he wouldn't budge. Finally, he took advantage of a moment when they weren't paying attention and left with his parents. They drove for another 2 days and finally arrived at Capital Hope Base. The base had rules and regulations, and ordinary people could support themselves by working. The Shins found jobs at the base that paid a few points each day, which they could use to buy supplies. Xuanhuan joined a team and often went out on missions with his teammates. Life was tough, but it was the end of the world, and the Shen family was grateful for what they had. He thought they could live peacefully like that until the zombies were gone and they could go back to their old lives, but Xuanhuan never expected to see that group of people again. This time, they weren't so friendly. They started a fight right away. Xuanhuan was confused and didn't know why. He could only fight back. Later, one of them told him that it was because he thought he was too good to join their team, and that he even dared to steal the boss's girl, so he deserved to die. Xuanhuan was speechless. Joining them was his own decision. Were they trying to force him? And he was fighting their boss for a girl? Aside from his mother, there wasn't another woman in his life. What was going on? After some more questioning, Xuanhuan realized that the woman they were talking about was the girl who'd called out to him that day. She was his classmate and had a crush on him back then. Xuanhuan felt wronged. He couldn't control whether or not other people liked him, not wanting to make enemies. He explained things to them, and they finally left, half believing him. He thought the misunderstanding was resolved, but what he didn't expect was that an even more violent revenge was coming. What Xuanhuan saw as a small thing was a slap in the face to Sun Songyang. He'd been having it easy since his rebirth. How could he run into something like this? If you want to blame someone, blame Xuanhuan himself. Before Sun Songyang's rebirth, he'd been a strong guy who Sun Songyang valued after his rebirth, but Xuanhuan was too proud and refused to join his team and be his lackey. Plus, one of Sun Songyang's harem members, the sweet high school beauty, used to have a crush on Xuanhuan. There was no way Sun Songyang would let that go. Sun Songyang was angry and jealous, and the consequences were dire. The apocalypse had turned everything upside down and civilization had collapsed. As a local big shot, it was easy for Sun Songyang to make a superpowered person disappear. Xuanhuan was targeted by Sun Songyang for no good reason, and the whole team was dragged down with him. They were set up during a mission, and countless people were killed and injured. Even his parents died in suspicious ways, leaving Xuanhuan completely alone. He got lucky and escaped death several times. In the constant setbacks and blows, his powers kept leveling up, attracting the attention of the military, and he joined them. After joining the military, he constantly fought against Sun Songyang and became his biggest rival. Unfortunately, Sun Songyang had too many trump cards. In the end, he failed to kill Sun Songyang and was killed by him instead. Chapter 37 The Villain in the Apocalypse 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What did the original owner want most? He wanted to protect his parents and teammates, and get revenge on Sun Songyang. Got it. Now that he knew what was driving the guy whose body he was in, Xuanhuan asked the system to keep an eye on things and finally got some sleep. The original owner had just unlocked his superpowers and was exhausted. He needed the rest. When Xuanhuan woke up the next morning, plenty of people were already up. With the apocalypse in full swing and zombies everywhere, everyone was on high alert. After a bit, seeing everyone was pretty much ready, Xuanhuan gathered them together to rehash their mission for the day. They arranged for the injured classmates to stay and guard the place, while the rest would go scavenge supplies. Xuanhuan and a dozen others cautiously stepped out of the room. They were in a small warehouse next to a roadside apartment building. No sooner did they get outside than a zombie charged straight at them from the left. The classmates' hearts leaped into their throats. They barely had time to react and figured they were toast. Look out! Someone shouted in a panic. Just when everyone thought Xuanhuan was a goner, he blasted an ice arrow right into the zombie's brain, then gave it a kick that sent it sprawling backward, stone cold dead. It was clearly dead. Everyone's eyes went wide at the unexpected sight, and surprise turned into excitement. They glimpsed a glimmer of hope. Who knew Xuanhuan would be so strong right after getting his powers? Maybe they'd unlock theirs someday and become just as powerful. Alright, let's move out, Xuanhuan said, shattering their daydream. Okay. The others trailed behind Xuanhuan, feeling a lot safer. The supply run went smoothly. They homed in on a supermarket and, lucky for them, didn't run into many zombies on the way. Inside, they quickly filled their backpacks and headed back. Satisfied, Xuanhuan led the group back the way they came. Again, they didn't encounter many zombies, and Xuanhuan took out the few they did see with his ice arrows. Honestly, the system deserved the credit for finding the supermarket so easily and picking a route with so few zombies. Right now, the system was practically begging to be praised. How's that for useful, host? Not bad. I'll pay you back your points later. Really? Thanks, host. You're the best host in the whole fast travel game. Sure, Xuanhuan chuckled, hearing the system's youthful excitement. Back in the room, they divided up the food. After eating, someone mentioned wanting to go home to find their parents, and everyone agreed. After a few days, everyone was getting used to the whole zombie thing. The local classmates, though scared, all wanted to check on their families. The group broke up. Classmates who lived in the same direction paired up, while others went solo. The original owner lived in a villa in the suburbs, and none of Xuanhuan's classmates lived that way. After watching them leave, Xuanhuan ducked into a hidden corner and slapped 1,000 miles talisman on himself. Instantly, he was outside the original owner's villa. It was silent. Xuanhuan walked right in and announced to the two people cautiously peering out to see what was going on, "Dad, Mom, I'm home." "Moo bai, it's really you. You're finally back." "I was worried sick," his mom said, nervous about the noises outside. Seeing her son, she breathed a sigh of relief and yanked him inside. Xuanhuan stepped inside, and his parents looked him over. His dad murmured, "It's good to have you back, son. It's good to have you back." They'd clearly been worried sick. That evening, Xuanhuan told his parents he'd unlocked a dual system ability. He called his space a space system ability, which explained it. Having a space was super useful in the apocalypse. Xuanhuan pulled out a bunch of ingredients from the space, and the family had a feast. During his travels in the last world, Xuanhuan had stocked his space with tons of food. It was tough to find supplies in this world, so it was perfect timing. "Moo bai, do you really have superpowers?" After dinner, the family sat in the living room, making plans. His mom still couldn't believe her son had the superpowers from TV, and two of them at that. She was still in shock. "Yeah, Mom," Xuanhuan said, holding out his hand. A chunk of ice floated above his palm. Seeing his mom staring at the ice, Xuanhuan let her hold it. His dad looked eager to try, so Xuanhuan gave him a piece, too. Feeling the cold in their hands, they finally believed their son really had superpowers. This wasn't just a dream. They were overjoyed. Their son had always been exceptional. Even with the apocalypse, God was still looking out for him, giving him what he needed to survive. Once the excitement died down, reality set in. The family planned their next move. Xuanhuan suggested they stick around for a while. Just like in the original story, few people lived in the Shen family villa, so it was safe for now. The apocalypse had just started, so most people hadn't reacted yet, and things were chaotic outside. His parents agreed. The next day, Xuanhuan went out with his dad to get supplies. He wanted to go alone, but his parents were worried. They agreed his dad would go with him while his mom stayed home. "Host, there's a supermarket about 100 meters ahead." The system was on the ball, helping Xuanhuan navigate. "Okay," Xuanhuan said to the system, then to his dad, "Dad, there's a supermarket up here. Let's check it out. Stay close." "Okay, don't worry." Xuanhuan led his dad to the supermarket the system had found. Xuanhuan carried a sword, and his dad had a steel pipe. The sword was a spiritual weapon from the space. Good thing he'd said he had space powers, or it would be hard to explain. They walked to the supermarket. After taking out all the zombies, his dad volunteered to stand guard while Xuanhuan went inside to grab stuff. Xuanhuan walked through the aisles, using his space to scoop up tons of stuff, leaving some for anyone else who came along. Just as they were about to leave, Xuanhuan heard footsteps coming around the corner, and the system chimed in, "Host, someone's coming, and there's a big group of zombies behind them." Chapter 38 The Villain in the Apocalypse 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as the system finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps grew closer. Xuanhuan could already see several people running towards them, heading in the same direction as they were going home. It was clear they couldn't just keep walking. "Dad, let's get out of the car." "Okay." Knowing the situation, Father Shen agreed. and they quickly got out and went back inside the supermarket. The others had obviously seen them and were closing in fast. Spotting a zombie about to take down one of the runners, Xuanhuan acted. An ice arrow shot from his hand, hitting the zombie squarely in the head, and it dropped to the ground. The guy who'd almost been zombie Chow was stunned for a second, then ran like hell. 4 of them piled into the supermarket after Xuanhuan, one gasping. "Close the door. Quick!" That they wasted no time slamming the door shut and skillfully shoving shelves in front of it as a barricade. The zombies were just a beat too late and were locked out, now pounding on the door. "Man, I'm beat. That was close. I thought I was a goner for sure," the guy Xuanhuan had saved said, clearly shaken. "Tell me about it." "Terrifying." After a few moments of breathless chatter, they calmed down and noticed Xuanhuan and Fatherson standing to the side. The guy who owed Xuanhuan his life stepped forward. "Hey, was that you who saved me back there?" "No big deal," Xuanhuan replied casually. "Thanks, man, thanks. You guys stocking up?" "Yep." It was still early days in the apocalypse, and people were clinging to their old routines. "Sorry about that. Those zombies were on our tails. Must have given you a scare." The guy remembered the zombie going down in one shot and felt a little foolish. He hadn't seen exactly what Xuanhuan used, but anyone with that kind of power probably wasn't easily spooked. "It's fine," Fatherson said politely. "Didn't bother me," Xuanhuan added flatly. Right. The guy clearly wasn't much of a talker, and the silence was a little awkward. "Lee, bro," a younger guy called out. "Hey, thanks again for your help, the zombie thing. We were just looking for supplies in the next block over." Xuanhuan figured out pretty quick what had happened. They'd been scavenging and accidentally unleashed the zombies trapped in some store, then panicked and ran. Their movements had drawn even more of the undead, culminating in the scene they just witnessed. "Sorry for dragging you into this. You can head out once the zombies clear out. You can't exactly control a zombie horde." Seeing how sincerely the kid was apologizing, Fatherson waved it off. "It's all good. No worries. Host, that's Liang Xian." The system chimed in. "Yeah, I know." He'd recognized him right away. Xuanhuan was actually a little surprised. He hadn't expected to run into Liang Xian here. Liang Xian had eventually joined the original owner's team at the Capital Hope base. He was cheerful, got along well with the original owner, and had died because Sun Songyang had set him up. The original owner's wish had been to protect his teammates. Xuanhuan had initially planned to follow the original plot and join the Hope base, then hand out protective amulets. But now that he'd run into Liang Xian early, he couldn't just ignore him. He vaguely remembered Liang Xian arriving at the Hope base with just one other person. Now he was with a group, and they seemed to be on good terms. Maybe people had gotten separated or died along the way. "Got a place to stay? What are your plans?" Xuanhuan asked. Liang Xian was a little taken aback by the question from a stranger, but he answered honestly. "Nah, we were just gonna head home and lay low for a while. No real plans yet. I'm Shinmubai. We live in the XX Villa area in the suburbs. Not much traffic out there, so fewer zombies. We're thinking about starting a team. You're welcome to join us and come back with us." Xuanhuan paused, and frost began to form in his hands. "Also, I've got ice powers and space powers." Father Shen was surprised to hear his son say all this. Though he didn't know his reasoning, he trusted he had his reasons. He kept quiet and listened. Liang Xian and the others stared at the ice forming in Xuanhuan's hands, awestruck. Superpowers. This guy had actual superpowers. Someone realized that the weapon that had taken out the zombie and saved Li must have been his doing. "You serious?" one of the younger guys in Liang Xian's group asked. "Yeah, you think I'm joking? If we join your team, will you look out for us?" "Yep. Can we talk it over?" "Sure. Just let me know before the zombies wander off." Father Shen watched them huddle together, whispering. "Mu Bai, what's this about starting a team?" he asked quietly. "Dad, in times like these, we need the strength of a team." Father Shen stared, then nodded in understanding, patting Shi Qing on the shoulder. "Good thinking. You're planning ahead." The system watched silently as the host told a bald-faced lie with a straight face. He could easily protect the Shen family, and fewer people would be easier. After a quick discussion, Yang Xian and his friends came back. "We're in. We'll join your team." "All right. Got any family or friends you need to pick up? Bring them along. We'll head out together." Zombies identify humans by scent and sound. They'd been holed up in the supermarket for hours now, and the zombies had mostly wandered off. Shi Qing opened the door and stepped out, using his powers to clear the way. Several zombies went down instantly. Seeing this, everyone else felt they'd made a wise decision to join Shi Qing's team. This was definitely the express lane to survival. They grabbed weapons from the supermarket and helped take down the remaining 2 or 3 zombies. After dealing with them, Shi Qing pulled a car out of thin air. "Get in." The others gaped at the car that had just appeared, exclaiming in amazement before quickly piling in. They still had family and friends to collect, so Shi Qing told them to direct him. Soon, they were picking up their loved ones. Seeing Yang Xian greet a woman who emerged with her things packed, calling her mom, Shi Qing was silent. In the original timeline, Yang Xian's parents were already gone when the original owner met him. "Looks like he's pretty lucky to have run into me early." 10 minutes later, Shi Qing's car took the lead, plowing through any zombies in their path as they made their way back to the Shen residence. Chapter 39 The Villain in the Apocalypse 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the Shen family villa, Mrs. Shen was pacing, a bundle of nerves. Hearing a car pull up, she glanced out the window, recognizing her husband and son's vehicle. She hurried to the door. "You're back. What took you so long?" "Everything all right." Shi Qing and Mr. Shen got out of the car. Shi Qing, noticing his mom's worry, reassured her, "It's okay, Mom. We just ran into something." Mrs. Shen looked puzzled. Before Shi Qing could explain, more cars arrived, and people started piling out. Seeing all the strangers, her confusion deepened. Mr. Shen explained the whole situation. After hearing the story, Mrs. Shen's confusion turned into acceptance. "Your son's right. There's strength in numbers." That she clearly didn't mind Shi Qing's impromptu decision. As everyone approached, Mrs. Shen greeted them warmly and started making arrangements for them to get settled. Shi Qing and Mr. Shen had brought back 8 people, Yang Xian and his mother, 2 brothers about Yang Xian's age, and brother Li's wife and kids. The man he'd rescued. The Shen family villa was huge, with plenty of empty rooms. There was more than enough space for everyone. Even after they moved in, there were still several rooms to spare. The Shen family used to have a staff, but with the flu outbreaks before the apocalypse, Mrs. Shen had given them all time off. They never came back after the world ended. Once everyone was settled, they all had dinner together to introduce themselves. The next day, Shi Qing started assigning tasks. Since they were a team now, everyone had to pitch in. Shi Qing assigned the men to go out each day to scavenge for supplies and take out zombies. The 3 women, brother Li's young son, and his daughter stayed at the villa to handle logistics. No one objected to the arrangement. Shi Qing taught everyone some basic self-defense moves and had them practice every day. The men went straight to zombie combat. Although he promised to protect them, he believed that self-reliance was key. He couldn't guarantee he'd always be able to watch everyone's back. Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Shen were an exception, with the system constantly monitoring them and the amulets Shi Qing had given them. Even if he could protect them for a while, it was better to teach them to fish than to give them fish. Shi Qing planned to train everyone, improve their combat skills, and empower them to defend themselves. As the strongest and smartest member of the team, he had everyone's respect, and they readily followed his lead. Meanwhile, Shi Qing stood outside a store, watching several people fighting zombies nearby. He observed quietly, not intervening. The apocalypse had just started, and the zombies were still in their early stages. slow-moving and less aware than humans. Xuanhuan was there to make sure they didn't get into serious trouble. After a lengthy battle, the snarling zombies finally fell one by one. They'd won. Dude, I just took out 8 zombies. Liang Xian said, approaching with a hint of pride. He was in good shape and was doing remarkably well in killing zombies, racking up the highest kill count. Seeing that he was angling for praise, Xuanhuan didn't hesitate to give it. Nice work. You're making great progress. Keep it up, and you'll get even better. Yeah, I will, Brother Mu Bai. I want to be as strong as you. Liang Xian declared, his eyes shining. Alright, keep at it. Xuanhuan smiled slightly, looking at the boy who was a year younger than the original owner. Liang Xian had superpowers later on, but they hadn't been activated yet. Still, his current strength was nothing to sneeze at. It was enough to handle a small group of regular zombies. Everyone else was doing well too. They all knew that the world had changed and that they needed to improve their skills to survive. No one slacked off during training. At first, they were only brought back because of Liang Xian. After getting to know each other, he realized that Liang Xian's 2 neighbors were solid guys, and it really did feel like birds of a feather flocked together. Everyone was trying to adapt to this new world. While Xuanhuan was training them, he was also keeping up with his own training. The world had a decent amount of spiritual energy, so he started cultivating right away. The original owner's body was an ice spiritual root and his aptitude wasn't bad. He himself was a cultivation genius, and his realm was already decent. At this point, his progress was lightning fast. At the same time, Sun Songyang was making waves. Using his prophetic advantage, he brought his parents to find a few people who would be big shots later but were struggling now. He played the savior, helping those people out, earning their gratitude, and then showing off his strength. It was a cheesy but effective routine. Sun Songyang successfully convinced several people to follow him and become his loyal underlings. Xuanhuan watched him running around through the system and bringing back the people who had killed the original owner's parents and teammates in the original storyline. No rush star. He'd wait until they were all together and then take them down at once. One day, Xuanhuan was killing zombies with Liang Xian and the others when he suddenly received a warning from the system. Warning. Host, abnormal soul detected. Sun Songyang has been reborn. Xuanhuan was surprised. This was Sun Songyang's second rebirth, wasn't it? The first rebirth could have been a coincidence, but what was happening now? Can you figure out why he was reborn, host? I can't detect that at the moment, but I did detect that the magnetic field around him is highly unstable. His rebirth this time must be unusual. I've reported it to the main system. Host, please be careful when you encounter him in the future. Got it. I'll be careful. Sun Songyang frowned, feeling his weak body. He hadn't expected to be reborn again. In his last life, he had become the king of humanity, surrounded by beautiful women. He had no regrets as he approached death. If he had to name one regret, it would be that he couldn't live forever. Now that he was reborn again, could it be that the heavens heard his desires? After all, wasn't rebirth an alternative form of immortality? Sun Songyang's smile widened. Back on Xuanhuan's side, after learning that Sun Songyang had been reborn again, he occasionally checked on Sun Songyang's progress through the system. Compared to his first rebirth, Sun Songyang's second rebirth was noticeably different. After all, it's easy to get used to the finer things in life, but going back is hard. If he had to pick out the biggest change, it was his attitude, that high-handed, arrogant, and self-centered demeanor. Xuanhuan found it a little amusing. Sun Songyang was only a foundation establishment cultivator in his last life. Chapter 40 The Villain in the Apocalypse 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Every day in Xuanhuan was packed, and before I knew it, 2 months had flown by. I woke up and crammed everything I could into my space. Soon, Liang Xian came running over. Mu Bai, we're all packed. Got it. A few days back, a helicopter had flown over town announcing that the government was setting up survivor bases and would be sending troops to search and rescue people. Those who could make it to a base on their own should, and those who couldn't should stay put and wait for rescue. after talking it over, we decided to head to the Capital Hope base. Everyone's gotten a lot tougher, and those ugly zombies don't scare us so much anymore. Today was the day we'd agreed to leave. I walked out, looked at our almost packed gear, waved my hand, and everything vanished into my space. "Alright, let's roll," I said, looking at the group. "Okay." That we piled into the cars, 11 of us in 3 vehicles, and pulled out of the Shen family villa, heading north. The trip was pretty smooth, stopping and starting, grabbing supplies during the day and finding a place to crash at night. We ran into plenty of zombies, but they were easy to handle. I knew that the reason Liang Xian and the others were having such an easy time with the zombies was that they hadn't mutated yet. According to the plot, in a few days, the zombies would level up. They'd be faster and more agile, squeezing humans even harder. At the same time, some of us would start developing superpowers. Sure enough, a few days later, the zombies were noticeably faster. And Liang Xian, Chen Qingxiong, and Chen Qingming suddenly spiked fevers. "Mu Bai, what's wrong with them? Why are they burning up like that? Is something bad happening?" Brotherly asked, worried about the 3 feverish guys. I checked them out with my spiritual power. "They're fine. Their bodies are just awakening their superpowers." Brotherly sighed with relief, then lit up with excitement. "Seriously? That's awesome," that he told everyone the news, and Mother Liang went from worried to overjoyed. Everyone was stoked for the 3 of them. With superpowers, they'd be even more badass. Because they were sick, we holed up in a little house in the countryside. They were out of it for 2 days, and when they woke up, they all had powers. In the room, Liang Xian was grinning like an idiot at the little flame dancing in his hand. Score, he thought. I got powers too. Maybe I can be as strong as Mu Bai. Chen Qingxiong and Chen Qingming were also tripping out, feeling the power flowing through them. I walked in and couldn't help but laugh. "Wakey wakey." Liang Xian grinned when he saw me. "Yeah. Mu Bai, I got powers too. Check it out." He showed me the little flame. "Sweet. We don't have to worry about starting fires anymore," I said. Just like in the story, Liang Xian got fire, Chen Qingxiong got metal, and Chen Qingming got space. They were all hyped for a few days, until they ran into some zombies on the road and their excitement fizzled out. Liang Xian was eager to test out his new power, but the flame sputtered out almost as soon as he threw it at a zombie. It barely tickled them. Chen Qingxiong's superpowered metal sword barely scratched the zombies and broke almost instantly. Seeing this, they were both dumbfounded. The awesome, all-powerful abilities they'd imagined were weaker than bashing zombies with steel pipes. They looked at each other, ditched their useless powers, grabbed the pipes, and started swinging. After we dealt with the zombies, Liang Xian looked bummed. "Mu Bai, why are our powers so different from yours?" Everyone looked at me. Mother Liang playfully smacked him upside the head. "Idiot, of course they're different." Realizing he hadn't explained himself well, Liang Xian clarified, "No, I mean, why are our powers so weak? You can take out zombies with a wave of your hand." He and Chen Qingxiong were nowhere near as powerful as me. Their attacks were practically useless, and Chen Qingming's space was tiny compared to mine. He could only fit a few things in it, while I could store practically everything with a wave of my hand. What gives? That's because the host is no longer a regular person, the system thought to itself. Seeing their frustration, I said, "Powers can be leveled up. You're just at a low level right now. You can be like me once you upgrade." "Really?" they asked in unison. "Totally. Got it." They suddenly understood, and their eyes lit up with hope again. Things were going smoothly for me, but Sun Songyang was having a rough time. He was currently in his room, staring at a horde of zombies roaring not far away, feeling totally pissed off. If this were his previous life, he could have wiped them out with a flick of his wrist. But now he was only at the 4th level of Qi training and couldn't take on that many zombies. He was stuck hiding out. "Songyang, dinner's ready." Sun's mom called from outside. "Coming." Sun Songyang snapped out of his thoughts and walked out of the room. Seeing the self-heating hot pot on the table, his appetite vanished. In his past life, he ate fresh food. He had 5-star chefs whipping up new dishes every day. Every meal was a gourmet experience. Now, it was all bread and jerky, or instant noodles and self-heating hot pot. The best he could get was the 3 dishes and a soup his mom made, but it wasn't even 1% as good as what he used to have. He had stocked up on a ton of supplies before the apocalypse. For convenience, he'd mostly gotten semi-prepared stuff that was easy to store, and very little fresh food. He'd been proud of that in his previous life, but Sun Songyang had forgotten what that felt like now. "Boss, come eat." Lei Daqiang called out, seeing Sun Songyang standing there. "You guys eat. I'm not hungry." "Boss, you gotta eat something." "Nah." Sun Songyang turned around and went back to his room.